Today's message comes from the 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 to 14 from the New American Standard Bible. For even as the body is one and yet has many members, and all the members of the body, though they are many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we are all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and we were all made to drink of one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many. Some years back, I underwent a sleep study at a hospital in which they wired electrodes all over my body and primarily my head. And they tied everything back into a ponytail and told me to get a good night's rest. And that really wasn't possible. They did this to determine if I had sleep apnea or not, which I do. At night, in my sleep, I forget to breathe. And only after my oxygen level drops below 70% does the rest of my body panic and give me a shot of adrenaline to get my respiratory system jump started. I was told that my body works harder when I'm at rest than when I'm awake, and that eventually I'm going to damage my heart. So they put me on a CPAP machine. I get a Darth Vader mask to wear to help me breathe. And so I guess in all reality, I should be used to be wearing a mask by now. Breathing's important, and it's up to my respiratory system to do its job to enable the rest of my body to function. The other systems and organs of the body can only do their job well if the respiratory system does its job well. On the flip side, the other systems and organs in the body also need to do their job well. In 1 Corinthians 12:12 to 14, Paul draws upon the analogy that the human body is one unit, that it is comprised of many components or members or organs that together contribute and constitute what it takes to be a body. Such then is the body of Christ, a unit comprised of many members, or in other terms, systems and organs. Now, Paul uses this as a transition segment in this chapter. He was previously talking about the gifts of the Spirit. There are various gifts of the Spirit, but they all emanate from the one same Spirit. These gifts are manifested to individual members, systems, and organs in different degrees for the purpose of enabling the body of Christ to function. I want us to notice all the unique attributes or talents of the Spirit, that they are divided. And then the Spirit distributes them to every individual as the Spirit sees fit. Those Spirit gifts are breathed into each of us. Everyone has at least one spiritual gift, if not several, and I sincerely doubt that anybody would have all of them at once, but they are breathed in for a spiritual function chosen specifically for them by the Spirit. Now, sometimes people would argue and say they have no spiritual gift, but that's not true. And sometimes people will say, well, my gift is of no importance in the body of Christ. That's not true either, because whatever gift or gifts you were given were specifically tailored to you as an individual to be used. The New American Standard Version states that the different members, the different spiritual systems, the different spiritual organs of a church, such as wisdom, knowledge, faith, healing, prophecy, miracles, discernment, speaking in tongues and interpreting tongues, those are given individually to those member systems or organs for the common good of the whole organ, the body. The gifts come forth from one Spirit, which is then divided or distributed individually to the members, systems, or organs of the one body of Christ for the benefit of the whole body. Now, Paul establishes this and proceeds with the transition to the point in verse 14 that the Spirit is not just one member, one system, or one organ. It is the sum of all the members, systems, and organs that are added together. Because the body then is a sum, if something is missing, it doesn't add up. and the body becomes disabled. It becomes crippled. This is why Paul later states that the foot cannot devalue its contribution to the body because it's not a hand and say, well, therefore, I'm not as important and I'm not a part of the body. We need to bear in mind the body cannot so easily travel without the foot. What if the ear said it was not a part of the body because it was not an eye? Well, if every part of the body was an eye, we'd be nothing but a big eyeball walking around. We might have great vision. We might be able to blink. But could we get to where we want to go? Could we hear what's coming up behind us? Could we catch what's being thrown in our direction? Could we flee what might be pursuing us? Could we smell if the house was on fire? You see, Paul says that the body has been organized as pleases God. If we refuse to function as the Spirit has chosen for us, then we hinder the body, and I don't believe that pleases God. The body does not consist of members, systems, or organs that envy or overesteem what others are, nor do they belittle the significance of themselves or others. All the members of the body have a part in the whole of the body. Everyone has a part in God's plan. Paul says, let there be no division in the body. Let the members, the systems, the organs have a deep consideration for each other because ultimately we are one body. If one of us suffers, how can the rest of the body not take note and suffer with it, sharing in that pain? If one would receive good news, how can the rest of the body not rejoice with that particular part's good fortune? Now, I mentioned earlier about my tests regarding sleep apnea. If left uncorrected, I jeopardize how the rest of my body functions or even exists. You know, I've had to sometimes sit with the families or other individuals while a loved one's body shuts down. And quite often it's the news that the kidneys are shutting down. Soon the fluids in the body will become more toxic and water will begin to gather around other organs. The circulatory system undergoes stress as the extra fluid gathers around the heart, restricting its beating as congestive heart failure that starts to set in. The respiratory system cannot take in the sufficient amount of air to keep the individual alive. The amount of oxygen being supplied is continually increased until they reach a higher number, until they can't go any further because you end up with a body that is maxed out. The body can only process so much oxygen. Actually, too much oxygen absorption, more than 22%, can be fatal. Death inches along further until the body expires. It typically starts because one member, one system, one organ shuts down and throws the burden of its function onto the other members, systems, or organs to pick up the slack. Body goes into catastrophic failure and completely stops because the remaining members, systems, and organs can no longer carry the load that has now been shifted upon them. Remember how Paul talked about how the parts of the body were not interchangeable and each had their function? You know, kidneys do what kidneys do. They cleanse the system of the body. The heart does what the hearts do. It beats and keeps the blood flowing. The brain does what brains do, think, or at least hopefully we think. But neither the heart nor the brain can do what kidneys do. And so it is in the body of Christ. As we look at church membership, and by that I'm saying those who are actively involved in the function of the church, not somebody who just has their name recorded in a book somewhere, we can observe that when we begin to depend too much on a few to maintain the former status quo, we start to move towards burnout. There becomes an internal trend towards the member system organ failures and a tendency for other members, systems, and organs to try and pick up the slack. Now, this isn't something new that just started, but it is something going critical mass within many congregations today. And if we're not careful, it can be us. If there's something going on, we're not going to fix it by ignoring it or just pretending it isn't there. That's denial. Maybe you're working in an area in the church that it's not quite what God had designed for you to do. If you're compensating in an area that the Spirit has not gifted you in, you and the rest of the body are going to suffer. We talk a lot about church vitality. Well, vitality means our liveliness. So therefore, I would say that lack of vitality would also mean our deathliness. Do we intend to move forward, or are we going to go into hospice? 10 years back, the Western Pennsylvania Annual Conference predicted that over the next 10 years, they expected to close down over 300 churches. That time has passed, and we find ourselves under some very extraordinary conditions in the state we're living. The question we need to ask ourselves is, will we be one of the 300 casualties? I would pray not, because there's a lot of potential here. What I would propose is that we think about getting better. I propose that we would think about doing better. Not that we're bad, just that we could and can be better. Now, this is a holdover from last week. Take a deep breath, inhale, hold, exhale. You remember that little exercise from last week? Those are our lungs at work, part of the body doing their thing. We are the body of Christ, and we're not in a sprint. We are in a marathon, and the goal is to persevere to the end, and that we all finally reach the end of our own goal, all of us.